Welcome to Business Talk here on businesstech.co.za. It's time to talk about what we really need to get right as South Africans, and that is getting entrepreneurship going in this country. South Africa's growth story, we often talk about in kind of big abstract numbers, GDP forecasts, infrastructure spend, policy reform. But if you really want to understand where real economic resilience is being built, you need to look much closer to the ground, to those small businesses, to township entrepreneurs, to rural innovators that are the ones really quietly in the background creating jobs where very few alternatives exist. And today we're turning our attention to one of the country's most influential players in that space, the SAB Foundation. Joining me is Sarah Mthintso, who's Executive Director of the SAB Foundation, newly minted ED, and the foundation really has spent more than a decade backing entrepreneurs who don't just survive in these environments, but actually thrive, particularly women and youth and people with disabilities. So, Sarah, I must say, it's great to have you with us. You've stepped into this role of Executive Director at a time when small businesses are under enormous pressure, but also full of potential. So, as the new head of the foundation, talk us through the kinds of entrepreneurs and businesses you're looking to support and what for you really makes an SMME stand out from the rest.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me on your show. So, you are quite right. I'm relatively new in the foundation, but it doesn't quite feel like I'm in this space for less than 4 months. But back to your question, I think as you correctly pointed out, SAB has been in this game for quite a while, and the sort of entrepreneurs we really seek to support are entrepreneurs who are alert and alive to the realities of the country. They understand that we live in a country that's highly challenged with social and economic challenges, and they literally looking to innovate to solve those challenges whilst building and growing their businesses. So we don't just pick entrepreneurs from the streets. We're quite deliberate about making sure that those that we pick understand fully the social challenges that we have in South Africa and figuring out how we solve those kinds of social challenges using entrepreneurship. And you're correct in saying entrepreneurship is actually a great lever in driving and contributing to economic growth. So that's the one aspect of it. The second aspect is also that because entrepreneurship by design is very complex and very hard, we're looking for those who are in it for real. So those who have some sense of resilience, some sense of grit, and also who really see themselves understanding that there are hurdles in this journey, but there are those like the likes of SAB that are willing to walk alongside you. So we are here not only to provide financial support, but we actually are here to hold you along the journey, connect you with like-minded entrepreneurs, and make sure that all of you combined and supported by SAB, you thrive.
And there are so many in that space, in that definition that you've just described, that are resilient, that are businesses that maybe don't have the scale, they don't have marketing budgets, so you don't see them in the business day, for example, but they're there. I was chatting to the founder of Inglu, Cobus Tritter, the other day, and he's helping, township entrepreneurs effectively with their rental businesses. He says, Michael, the dynamism in this market is just phenomenal. And I think so many operate on the fringes of the formal economy, often by necessity rather than choice. How do you see small businesses kind of successfully taking up space in the formal market? And what role should large institutions, corporates and funders be playing to make that transition possible and less intimidating than it probably looks from the outside?
Yeah, and you are right, there are quite a lot. I'm blown away on a daily basis just interacting with those that we support, some of whom obviously have been with the SAB Foundation for quite a while. I need to mention that we're quite deliberate and intentional in how we pick our entrepreneurs. So you find a lot of our entrepreneurs are mainly women, young people, people with disabilities, and entrepreneurs that are generally overlooked by your mainstream funders. And I find that a lot of them, despite the challenges they would have gone through having approached a lot of these mainstream, they still display that level of resilience. They still display that level of grit. And we find that when you engage with them, they get to understand that entrepreneurship support is not just about giving them money. It is about walking the journey with them. And I will at some point talk to you about the extent of the support we provide to them. But I'm quite impressed with just how many of these young people, women, people with disabilities are putting themselves in these spaces, but also understanding that when their businesses grow, they actually increase opportunities to create space for others. So they're not only taking up space for themselves, but they're seeing themselves as people who have the potential to make meaningful contribution through employing others, through supporting others to grow their own businesses.
And it's that old saying of you've got to see it to be it. Often
Yeah.
when you see those businesses in those communities, you create that aspiration to say, hang on, I can also be an entrepreneur, and there is an opportunity for me despite the circumstances from which I find myself being less than equal. And I think that's a big thing in South Africa, because we need to be equalizing the playing field, and our history is our history. And that's why I think it's so incumbent upon all businesses to think about how can we integrate these businesses, how can we empower them, and how can we help them level the playing field. Now, it's very interesting because you do a lot of research. Your impact report shows that roughly, I think it's about 88% of the businesses supported by the SAB Foundation over the last decade are rural. They're based in rural, peri-urban areas, a striking number. So the large majority. What's driving the emergence of these kind of local economies, and how significant could they be in reshaping the regional growth story when we look at these areas and reducing inequality outside of the major metros?
Yeah, so I think there are quite a number of things. In my personal observations and opinion, I find that a lot of these businesses or a lot of these entrepreneurs have really tried to penetrate the mainstream economy, and they can't find jobs, they can't find funding opportunities, they understand where they reside, that there are these challenges that they have. I mean, children are struggling with maths and science, and a young person is sitting there and saying, how can I solve for that particular challenge? How can I use technology to assist these young people who have a quest for maths and science but don't know how to deal with the hurdle of understanding? So a lot of these young people come into that space because they realize that they exist in those environments where opportunities are rare, but they also are moving away from depending on corporates to get opportunities. And when I say depending on corporates, I'm talking about knocking on doors looking for jobs. They are realizing that if and when they've got these very strong quality ideas and they are backed by the right companies and they are given the right support, they too can thrive and come back and plow back in their communities. So we see a lot of them coming up with ideas, coming up with businesses supported by the foundation, and then going back to their same communities and really making a difference in those areas. And I think for me, that is so fundamental. So it's not about getting a guy who's sitting in Limpopo to start a business in Gauteng, but it's getting a guy in Limpopo, in Thohoyandou, for example, starting a business and that business thriving in that area and benefiting those local communities where the business is located.
Yeah, and that's how you get that multiplier effect and that spillover into those more rural or peri-urban economies. And it also it challenges those long-held assumptions that opportunity only lives in cities. And if we can do that, I think if you zoom out at a national level, you really start to have an outsized impact, because our metros are also creaking under this inward migration where people are looking for opportunities, our infrastructure is struggling to keep up. And so if we grow those economies, it's really fantastic at a national level. Inclusion is really a big part of what you do at the foundation. You consistently focus on women, as I said, youth, people with disabilities. I think these groups are often framed as vulnerable, but you approach them as economic actors. What does inclusion mean to you at the SAB Foundation, especially given South Africa's slow growth and high unemployment?
So for us, inclusion is not a by the way. It is something we deliberately integrate in how we do stuff. So when we design our programs, we design with the lens of inclusion in mind. So we know that when we support entrepreneurs and we focus and skew our efforts towards young people, they are most likely going to succeed. They've got the energy, they've got the drive, they are willing to learn, they are willing to really just take up lessons from different parts of support systems that we bring to them. Similarly, when we do the same for women, we understand the impact and the role of women generally in society. And the disabled people have also come to the fore because we then look at them and say, if you think about South Africa in general, these are groups or segments of our population that are generally left behind. And because we are guided by inclusion as an integral part of our strategy, we start with it at the very start of our design of our strategy. And we've picked up a lot of lessons in this instance. We've picked up that naturally, when you work with women in business, they have a tendency to bring others. And I guess it's an innate ability to draw others and walk along the journey with others. Young people very excited, calling up other young people to come to the fore. So we've really seen the benefits of working in these particular segments of our society and making sure that when we empower, it translates to empowerment in families, empowerment in communities, and largely empowerment in our society.
And that's universal. I think I've read studies in India where deliberate and intentional support, particularly for woman-owned businesses, had a much higher multiplier effect because of that intrinsic, innate, call it a maternalism that women have to be more inclusive. So it's so interesting that when you look at jobs, and I mentioned in the introduction that SMEs are big levers of job creation, just a sad fact of life. Big corporates seem to be reducing costs and kind of cutting headcount and using technology and AI. It's the SMEs that grow from 1 to 5 to 10. How do you see the foundation continuing to play a role here to help contribute to scaled job creation? And do you think there's anything that needs to change in the broader ecosystem for successful small businesses to grow beyond just maybe where they are surviving from month to month?
Yeah, so I think our philosophy when we think about how we measure success on the support we provide to our entrepreneurs, and many corporates, not many corporates, some corporates get it wrong because they tend to say, I want to give you, for example, a loan to set up your business, and my return is purely measured on financial basis. So how much of that money am I getting back? To us, we look at this program as quite comprehensive. So we look at how an organization gets the support and they're able to be profitable and all of that, but also how is this organization that we are supporting actually contributing in job creation? And we understand different industries have got different ways of measuring. If you're in agriculture, you probably will work a lot with seasonal jobs. If you are in manufacturing, it might be a different dynamic. But in my opinion, I think that we as corporates, we need to be very deliberate. We need to be patient. We need to understand that sometimes when you work with entrepreneurs, and whilst you have the job creation in the back of your mind, you have to align your support such that you strengthen them in the way that they grow as a business. And then you will start seeing the results of, I have invested 10 million. 2 years down the line, here's a company that's employing 100 people. And it's not just employing 100 people, they are in meaningful and quality jobs that you would want the new employees to be in.
Yeah, exactly. And that is an important distinction because I mean, the government does work with the expanded public works program by providing some menial labor, but it's not really the kind of work that can derive, people can derive great purpose and meaning from and really feel that they can uplift themselves into the future. It's really piecemeal work. And it's about how do we make this really qualitatively different. Sarah, for
Sure.
you, you said just under 4 months in the role. What's your vision for the foundation over the next few years? And maybe you could also just share a little bit more about your background and how you found yourself in this position.
Yeah. So I grew up in a township called Tembisa. And so I speak from a lived experience perspective because I know what it means to be a young person sitting in a township and not having any kind of hope for the future. And because I've been and I understand the importance of education and the importance of entrepreneurship, I bring that into anything and everything that I do. So my vision for the foundation, having worked in multiple foundations, I mean, at some point, I worked with a Vodacom, I worked with Telcom, I worked with Old Mutual, basically moving in the same space. So the extent of my experience is quite vast. I've worked in government, I've worked in NGO sector, so I understand the role we play as corporates in influencing policy. I understand what it means to be on the ground with NGOs to try and solve community challenges. But importantly, I understand how you use and you leverage the resources you have in the private sector to be able to make a contribution to the broader goals that are set for us by our government. So where I am, I see my role specifically as to protect and scale these institutions that we are working with. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. I'm actually looking to build on what the foundation has done over the last decade. So I'm working with these institutions to say, how do we bring depth in the work that we've done? How do we use technology to scale? How do we work in a manner that makes us central to how entrepreneurs think about their businesses? And I'm a proponent of entrepreneurs know what they want to achieve, and we basically are enablers in the background. We need to do what's right and what's best to support them. As corporate, we sometimes take advantage of the fact that we're in power by virtue of our resources. I don't take that disposition when I interact with entrepreneurs. I move from the premise that my role is to enable, my role is to support, and therefore I need to listen and hear the direction they want to pursue, and that's what I bring to the table.
Such a refreshing perspective, and one that can only come from someone with your background, with your breadth of experience across the public and private sectors, NGOs as well. Sarah Mthintso, thank you very much. And we wish you all the best in succeeding in that vision, because it's exactly what South Africa needs. It reminds me what Jack Ma said when he came to one of the president's first investment conferences, that in China, one of their key successes was they made entrepreneurs their everyday heroes. They really they
Sure.
put entrepreneurship on a pedestal, and I think listening to you talk, it very much aligns with what your vision is for the foundation. So thank you very much. All power to your elbow. We need everyone's hand on the pump on this one. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.